Okay, folks, it is 6 o'clock. Sir, you may go ahead and get us live if you choose to. So at 6 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Before we get started, let's go ahead and do some roll call. Sylvia, is that something you do, or is that something I need to do? I can do it. Okay, good. All right. All right, Mr. Todd Ireland.
Here.
Great. Mr. Chris Wiley.
Present.
Excellent. Miss Pat Chapman. Right?
Chambers.
Chambers, thank you. Sorry.
I'm here.
Thank you. We don't meet enough. Case in points. and Rufus Wells, thank you.
Present.
Excellent. Jed Hadaway present. All right. We do have a quorum. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and call for us to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, folks. So let's see. We've got the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
I make a motion that the agenda be approved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Motion carries. Approval is adopted for the agenda. Let's see. Second item here is the Select Fulton Atlanta starts here. So do we have a presenter for this item? All right. Afternoon.
You hear me now? Sound good?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It looks like I'm a healthy part of the agenda here, so you can kind of give me the signals whether you want me to take longer or shorter. I can blitz this and do it a little bit longer. I would assume there'll be a lot of questions afterwards, so happy to stay around and answer some of those or follow up with Sylvia. But thank you, members of the Development Authority, for inviting me here today. My name is Samir Abdullahi. I'm the Director of Select Fulton. We're the Economic and Workforce Development Initiative here for Fulton County. We cover all 15 cities, including the city of Atlanta. We provide a wide array of services. I always like telling people, you go to a dinner conversation and people always ask, what do you do? And I say economic development, and there's a awkward pause, and there's a question, so what do you do? Hopefully through a bunch of slides today, we'll start to cover some of that work and orient you as to what we do and how we practice economic development. Works for me. I got it. There we go. So again, I'll quickly go through who we are. Anyone who knows me, especially if I have a captive audience of people who live in Fulton County, I like to do a big rah-rah, so by the numbers. Again, we're ambassadors, not only for Fairburn, but for Fulton County, which is the most economically active county in the state of Georgia. So I think there should be a little pride in that. I'll put some numbers to that. I'll go through really the meat of the presentation, which is how we practice economic and workforce development, and then try to highlight what I think is one of the better examples of this model in action. I think we're somewhat uniquely positioned. So quickly, who we are. Again, I mentioned we're the economic and workforce development arm for Fulton County government. We're about a $3.5 million budget. I'd say 2.9 of those 3.5 come from workforce development. We're funded through a federal grant called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's something that we don't apply for. We're entitled to it. Oddly enough, and unique for this board, we service Fulton County outside of the city of Atlanta. Atlanta's got a little juice. They've put their workforce development team together, so cut out Atlanta, service the north cities, service the south cities. I would say all the 5 metro workforce boards definitely work well together, recognizing that employees and employers are not going to be in the same community. So if we're training up individuals, if they end up working in Gwinnett, I'm okay with that as long as they get that employment. So I'd say there's a distinction between us and Atlanta, but we try to blur the lines on that. Out of the 15 Fulton County staff, about 4 of those are on the economic development side. We do have provider staff that do a lot of our case management work for workforce development, and that enables us to do a lot more strategic thinking. When you think about, I'm sorry, that should say 2022. When you think about our annual impact, I always like to think about it in terms of pipelines. So we touch over 100 plus economic, I call them state-driven economic development projects annually. These are large, serious, ready-to-make investments, but competitive nationally. Projects that we work, and we help through everything from site selection work, community socialization, access to utilities, or at least understanding that, again, connecting B2B operations, things like that, that will provide. We probably see around 20,000, these 100-plus projects probably bring around 20,000 new jobs and about 7,000 retained, about $4 to $5 billion of investment. And again, that's the pipeline, so companies prospectively looking at Fulton County, annually we convert 10 to 20%. Myself or Sylvia probably shouldn't say that we control the ebb and flow of the unemployment rate, right? It's not the economy's doing well because I'm doing well or bad because I'm doing bad. It's more of, are we getting in the pipeline of the opportunities for companies that are looking here in Fulton County? And I think we do a good job in that. On the workforce development side of things, our outputs are about 250 individuals on the adult side that we do credentialing for. So this may be either a short-term training like a CDL through a private institution, but a lot of our work is with two-year institutions like the technical colleges, Atlanta Tech or Gwinnett Tech. Requires more money, requires more work, but getting a certified registered nurse may have a little bit more impact in the community than another truck driver. And so we try to keep that balance. Another portion of that is about 150 youth that gain GEDs. So we're targeting individuals that got out of high school but didn't get their diploma. And obviously they're not able to go seek post-secondary education because they're missing that GED part. So we try to provide them with a little job shadowing, so how do you have a job, and then also get them through that GED so we can convert them to the adult side and get them in that two-year institution and get that training going. And I'm proud to say about 70% is our employment rate. That's 6 months after people exit out of the program and end up in a job related to what they were training. So not just a job, but a job related to the investment that we made. And again, I think this Venn diagram shows this hybrid between companies needing an active and trained workforce, people needing great jobs and connecting with these business opportunities. And so those are the two sides of the house we've tried to bring together. Here's my rah-rah, I'll go through quickly. Fulton County, we're made up of 15 distinct cities. You think about Fulton, Cobb, Gwinnett. Those are all big 1 million person counties. So in terms of people, same. In terms of economic output, a little bit different. We don't get GDP for counties, so I use a proxy of property values. What is the money invested in the ground as a way to signal how much economic intensity is happening here? So you can see we're almost double that of a Gwinnett County, almost double that of a Cobb County. If you think about the office market in Cobb, it's Galleria. If it's in Fulton County, you have everywhere from Midtown to downtown to Buckhead to Perimeter to North Fulton. So there's a lot more options there. The reason why we land a lot of great projects is because we have tons of real estate, as I mentioned. We have both industrial, office, and retail in the hundreds of millions of square feet versus, if you hear Midtown as a sub-office market, that's 30 million square feet. Downtown, 30 million square feet. So it just shows, again, the magnitude of commercial real estate we have on the ground. Highlighting the fact that, again, we've got a good bevy of Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. The companies are a little less important than all the benefits that they bring with them, all the third-party companies that either support them through shared services or suppliers or the other. Again, being able to say you're a Fortune 500 town helps companies feel more comfortable, especially those that are new to the Atlanta market, that they can be successful here. And maybe my biggest point on this slide, out of the entire 29-county metro Atlanta region, and I know that's starting to stretch into East Alabama, Fulton County represents 1 in 6 residents, only 6% of the land area, so we're that little sliver in the middle. But we represent 1 in 3 jobs and nearly 47% of all wages generated. So the reason why we have traffic is everyone's coming here to work, right? And again, we have built our brand around this idea that Metro Atlanta starts here, right? Companies know markets, they know Atlanta as the market. They're a little less excited about county government, so that's what we sell. Again, really at the most fundamental, at its most core level of why we do economic development, it's less for the dinners and the nice parties, although those are awesome. The two pieces I think we really focus on is encouraging high wage and high skilled jobs. Again, resource constrained, we're gonna focus on those we can get the most bang for our buck. High wage, high skilled jobs create a lot of rollover, spillover effects for retail jobs, restaurateurs, heads in beds, those kinds of things. So that's why we focus on those types of jobs. And obviously the other big piece is an increase in capital investment, so money that we can realize on the tax rolls today. All of that goes back to maintaining fiscal security for our communities. 99.9% of all services, whether it's libraries, senior centers, all geared towards residents. So this is kind of that small little piece that focuses on, at least for Fulton County, the other half of the digest, the commercial property owners. And again, they help to put, for every dollar they put in the system, they take out a less than $1 versus a citizen. They put in $1, they take out more than $1. So having that spread between both commercial and residential investment helps to provide for that fiscal security. Just thinking through again, what are the type of industries that we focus on? A lot of these mirror what the state of Georgia is working to recruit. We're very lucky in that Fulton County is a large and very diverse community, not just diverse in terms of people, but diverse in terms of commercial real estate, diverse in terms of industries. And that's why we're able to kind of recruit from both, again, I would say more knowledge-based jobs to more hands-on jobs. And just to include a little chart on the right there that shows that project pipeline and by industry. So we see a good diversity of companies that are still very interested in Fulton County, whether it's life science, data centers, more traditional industrial products like warehousing. I'd say we've seen a very strong push as of late around manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. I think those are great, creates a lot less truck traffic than some of these logistics facilities, higher wages and a little bit more commitment around the jobs and employees there.
Still requires a pretty large footprint though, right? I mean,
What?
pretty comparable to your warehouse.
Yeah, manufacturing,
footprint,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, same with the data center as
Yeah,
well.
right.
So how do we practice economic development? I'd say these are part of 4 big buckets of efforts that we do around business recruitment and retention, marketing and storytelling. We've learned post-pandemic that entrepreneurship and small business is an important and strategic component. And then again, some strategic redevelopment that we work on. So when you think about our business recruitment and retention efforts, it should be somewhat straightforward. Again, something I mentioned before, a lot of what we're providing is traditional site selection services, so helping them identify real estate that's available. Customized market research, but again, a lot of this bigger companies have access to because they deal in big data. It's more of the community socialization and understanding where that community wants to go that doesn't necessarily come out in the data that we work to provide. A whole list, again, of customized market research. We do ongoing existing industry and ecosystem engagements. That means like trade shows and others. We never do anything in silo. It's always partnered either with several cities or the state of Georgia, Metro Atlanta Chamber, kind of regional partners that go and promote Georgia first. Sometimes it's hard for my elected officials to get that we promote Georgia first. If they're an office product and we're promoting Georgia, there's a 99.9% chance it's going to land here somewhere in Fulton County for all the reasons mentioned before. So I'm fine with that. They can take the brand win, we'll get the company win. And as I mentioned, some targeted industry support. We'll talk about these. A lot of the marketing and public relations piece that we do, again, try to do things collaboratively and regionally. So that's local and targeted industry marketing. Fulton County storytelling, again, some of those numbers I talked about, 1 in 3 jobs, 40% of the wages, but also using the 15 distinct cities and where they sit, where they are in their development cycle, and where their brand identities are, leveraging those as opportunity to tell the greater Fulton County story. I'll leave it at that for that. Sorry, my battery keeps dying here. Okay, thanks. Some unique stuff that we've done around entrepreneurship and small business support. Like many counties, we received a good slug of federal funds, both with the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, to provide not only small business lending support, which we've done probably over $6 million, of which to date, 73% of which went to minority and female-owned businesses, again, targeting the groups that weren't hit by traditional markets like PPP loans and others. We do have this unique SBA grant that we're activating on in partnership with the South Fulton Chamber of Commerce. The SBA recognized, again, through PPP loans and others, they flooded the market essentially with a lot of cash for small businesses, but didn't provide that back-end training of how to improve and better your business, not just the cash side. And so that's what this Community Navigator pilot program, it's free classes in management, marketing, storytelling and the like that companies can sign up for, provided free, and the grant pays for it. Another unique tool that we provide, one among many, but I think probably the most notable one, is a tool called Size Up. Really useful small business intelligence. Literally, you put in 2 data points. You put in the city and you put in the industry sector. So let's say I wanted to open Indian restaurant in Fairburn. It'll give me all the analytics of Indian restaurants in Fairburn. It'll tell you over a timeline how many we're opening per year over the last 10 years. So you can see if you're ahead of the spike or behind the spike. What's the average revenue of an Indian restaurant in Fairburn? What's the average number of employees? So it's a lot of that work that the SBDC would be doing is, again, business preparation, putting together a business plan. Is there real market feasibility to do your business? That we provide kind of free on our website. So people find that as a very useful tool. You want to hit me with my next slide? Thank you. We are doing some strategic redevelopment there at Fulton Industrial, I-20 and Fulton Industrial. There's been some legacy hotels, really troublesome, that have caused a lot of issues, not only for that area, but we have our executive airport that sits just north of the site there at I-20 and Fulton Industrial. We are partnering with the city of South Fulton to do an opportunity zone there. We'll be bidding out those properties, so the hotels that you see there off of I-20 for redevelopment, ideally some type of fast casual restaurants. There's nowhere to eat. Some amenity that really activates the rest of the industrial corridor. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that have clients and prospects that come to that area are having to go over the river to Douglas County to put them in hotels, to give them restaurants and everything else. So we really feel like this site is going to be very catalytic for Fulton Industrial. And again, our interest is somewhat tied to the executive airport that sits over there. Next slide, please. So again, we've touched a lot of different projects all over Fulton County, whether it comes from headquarters, although I guess we'll probably want to, maybe we'll take the color out of Microsoft piece, just because they're on a pause and delay there. But obviously we helped to bring the Azure data centers that came down to Palmetto and East Point, FanDuel over at Ponce City Market. So again, I think it's just reflective of the success that Metro Atlanta's had, and we've been able to convert a lot of that here in Fulton County. Next slide, please. I'll go very quickly just through how does workforce development work. I mentioned kind of these 3 buckets of individuals that we serve. Adult and dislocated are somewhat synonymous, except for dislocated is someone who was recently let go. And so we can provide some additional services to those. And then I think I mentioned on youth. Next slide. There's our little donut hole. That is the city of Atlanta. I'd say we've made a mention to them. We'd love to take over. They have our same vendor. Mayor's Chief of Staff, Odie, is an old workforce guy, so I'm not sure he'll let it go. So maybe the next administration will have a little bit more pull there. We do have 2 career centers, one in north, one in south that sits there at Union City, and then an administrative office on the west side near Fulton Industrial at Adamsville Regional Health Facility. Again, another thing that we learned during the pandemic is really you need to go meet your customers where they are, as opposed to having these stagnant facilities that people have to come to. WIOA and this workforce grant require a lot of paperwork, and so having people to have to come on site, have their paperwork, maybe they didn't have everything, they had to come off site, come back on site, was just a disaster, to say the least. So we bought a mobile unit, we got it on a great discount, it's got computer labs, it's a way for you to register for some of these programs. We can use it for if you're having a community event or activation to bring it out. So that was really helpful, again, during the pandemic of helping to meet our customers where they are. Next slide. Just highlighting again, we've got a very big board, 23 plus members. That number's always shifting, but we try to bring in, and the legislation requires, a good broad brush of different business interests that sit on this board. So this is not a community or civic board, it's business led. On the next slide, you'll see just the types of companies that are represented. It's not exclusively business. There are some required partners on the labor side of things, on the union side of things, as well as on the higher ed and technical education. So we have all those represented. Just talking about some of the program enhancements, I'll say this program was not doing well in 2018. A lot of bad AJC articles. I think we've turned that around with a new model that we've provided. Not only is it a little bit more seamless for the individual that comes through our doors, it's a little bit more intuitive in the way that we're able to engage with them. Before, you couldn't scan your documents on your phone, you had to bring them in. So we've done some human-centered design things that help to break some of that down. We had a recent audit from the Department of Labor, which is our federal parent for the grant, saying that we continue to do a really good job in terms of readiness. I talked about our flexibility with our mobile workforce unit that we're able to take kind of around town. And another big piece is just those job placements, making sure we're not just training people and wishing them good luck, but getting them converted through job opportunities, and ideally through some of those that we're helping to recruit. Okay, that was a blast of information. I'll try to leave you with this last little bit here, which is how does this kind of development cycle work? How do the legs of Select Fulton help to bring in and land companies? Again, I like to think we're from the front end to the back end, getting the building out of the ground, getting a company into that building, making that company successful with the right workforce. So back in 2015, the Development Authority of Fulton County, which you know is very active, helped to support Majestic Realty at doing logistics, like I say, a complex and facility, providing incentives as a way for those buildings to come out speculatively. So they don't have a committed tenant, developers taking a big risk because, again, day one, lights are on, they may not be making money. They may be burning money, and that can influence, again, their capital stack and their lender's willingness to provide that lending. So it's a way to kind of get the building accelerated, get it out of the ground. That was helpful because in 2017, we were working with the state of Georgia on a prospective company looking to locate somewhere here in South Fulton. By virtue of this building coming out of the ground already versus the one that they were looking at in South Carolina, which was a nice little doodle on a page and would be 18 to 24 months to delivery, they decided on this location. We backed up that company, which turned out to be ASOS. It's a bigger hit with my wife than me, but they're a big hit in Europe, and this is their kind of big NAFTA location. Not only us, but 5 other workforce boards. We brought out the buses. We did a kind of big hiring and workforce development day. Again, especially for companies that are new to the market, they don't have their name in the market like a Coca-Cola and a CNN. It's a little bit harder for recruitment. It's a little bit more expensive on the HR front end side to tell your story and to recruit. And so that's some of that unloading that we provide on the front end for companies, especially large ones like this that are making a $40 million investment and 1,600 jobs. I would say, by the way, that we took care of them from building out of the ground to plugging into the building to making sure they were successful in that building, and probably, it was in Union City, so Mayor Williams and his charm, they came back in 2021 and did another $100 million investment to add automation, except for keeping most of the employees. So again, that shows it would be nice to say every year I wake up on January 1 and we close out all the projects by December 31. These things have long life cycles. There can be complications both on the real estate side of things and the workforce development side of things. And those are some of the problems that we try to alleviate. All right, I went through it quickly. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you.
Soak all that in.
Okay, good, yeah. That's usually how
Quite a
it
bit.
goes.
I have a question. It might be trivial, but specific to the south side, are you guys working with the cities on the south end, City South Fulton, Fairburn, Chattahoochee Hills, whatever? Are you guys working with them to identify appropriate zoning for some of these prospective projects, so such as industrial placement? I mean, there's kind of this sort of, you go anywhere in any direction 5 miles and you see a warehouse that's over 1 million square feet. Some of those are disrupting what would otherwise be retail or higher density land uses in those areas, and are negatively impacting some of those communities. Have you guys worked with some of those cities to identify appropriate industrial zoning for some of these larger projects coming into the state? I don't know if that's in your purview. I'm just
It's not, right?
question.
That's why cities
Maybe
became,
no.
cities became cities, to control their planning and zoning, to
Sure.
to control their police and fire, to control their parks and rec. So I can't create a building on
I
a
understand.
lot that's not already zoned. We direct it towards existing zoning.
Okay, gotcha.
Excuse me. You said that there was like a 70% placement on people in your program?
Yeah, on the workforce development side of things.
Is there any follow-up after to see how many people are remaining in those jobs a year on, or?
Yeah, and oddly enough, we have one person on the team that has access to Georgia Department of Labor information, where we don't even have to consult with them. We go in on the back end, we're able to see their wages through unemployment insurance. And so that's part of our monitoring. The big timeline is that first 6 months after graduation, but we will track them and making sure that they're, because again, there's a longer story there. We're trying to get beyond what a living wage is, because we face these things like benefit cliffs. If they get a little incremental increase in their wage, all these additional benefits they may be getting from the federal government fall off, and so their net position is actually down. So we're somewhat sensitive to it. It's a newer thing. We've been working with Oddly enough, the Federal Reserve of Atlanta has a workforce development unit inside of it. A member of their group sits on our board, and they've been helping us to try to define that piece. But the simple answer is, yeah, we track it for a good bit, and we're required to by federal law.
Okay, and additionally, you said that there was like a pool. I believe there's a pool like for minority and female-owned businesses to help them, I guess, get up and going.
Yes.
How large is that pool?
We probably have another, so there's 2 buckets. I'd say there's the small business loan side of things. There's another $2.5 million that we have available today. It is targeted, it's used American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and there's a requirement to target, they call them underserved individuals, but it would be minority and female businesses. And we have a group called Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs, a well-known community development financial institution that really is the administrator of that. And the reason why we use them is because that's the demographic that they work with. The other piece of that is our small business technical assistance program with the SBA, the Community Navigator Pilot Program, that while it's targeted for South Fulton, it's somewhat open to all. Again, free classes that we provide for small businesses, or just coaching,
Right.
one-on-one for management, leadership, marketing, a whole slew of different things.
How large does a business have to be in order to?
SBA says under 500, so. Yeah.
Okay.
Great, any other questions?
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so next item on the agenda is the City Attorney's Office Development Authority bylaws and annual updates. Something we want to go over?
Yes.
There.
Okay. Hello, my name is Serena Noel, and this is Amber Qualls. We're with the law firm of Hilliard Starkey, and we serve as city attorney for the city of Fairburn. We don't really have a presentation for you this evening.
Okay.
What we wanted to do was come and introduce ourselves and let you know that we're available to assist with any legal issues that you may have, because I understand you don't currently have authority counsel. So until that occurs, you're always free to contact us. And even after you secure authority counsel, we're still available to answer any questions. Just by way of background, I have practiced local government law for 24 years now. And most of that time has been spent on what I consider the business sexy side of local government, which is public finance and economic development. So this is kind of in my sweet spot. So that said, feel free to give us a call anytime. Sylvia always knows how to get in touch with us. She has our contact information, email, text, phone call. We're here to serve and available to assist.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. All right, and I don't believe that item requires any vote of any kind. No, of course not. All right, and so the next item on the agenda is the new meeting schedule. So has everybody had an opportunity to review the new meeting schedule? I know that the main change is,
Chairman,
Go ahead.
there's one other item. There is the South City Partners during the last Development Authority meeting, and my apologies if that is not on the agenda.
It is not.
okay, it is not. We need to amend the agenda in that case.
Yeah, we'll need to amend it. I think we have a different copy, but the South Fulton, the South City Partners, they are on the agenda to discuss the tax abatement that was discussed during last meeting. There were 2 items that the committee or the council authority, asked them to bring back before you. Specifically, what would be the benefits of the tax abatement,
Right.
both to them as well as to the city of Fairburn. The other item, they have a proposed memorandum of understanding that they would like to present to the Development Authority for your feedback.
Okay. Now, I have I guess, a technical question. The agenda that we have just voted to adopt earlier in
Do
the
you have to do
evening,
a motion to add?
we need to go ahead and make a motion to amend this agenda with these two items. Okay, so let's see, proposed
South
memorandum
Side
of
Park.
understanding, South City Partners. Okay, all right. So can we get a motion to amend the agenda, adding the South City Partners on the basis of two items, the benefit to the city of Fairburn of the tax abatement proposed and the proposed memorandum of understanding? Can we get a motion?
South City or South Side?
South City,
South City.
right. Can we get a motion?
So
to
moved.
amend? Oh, please, go ahead.
I'd like to make a
This is
motion
not our,
to,
our second motion.
pardon?
He's getting a
Mr.
second.
I
Ireland.
think we have a motion by Mr. Ireland. Can we get a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. So the agenda is amended, so that was a little bit of housekeeping. All right, so we'll go ahead and, Sylvia, those were the only two items?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with South City Partners, so please, come on up, guys.
Good evening. Thank you all for having us out here tonight and amending the agenda to let us present to you. Again, I'm Sean Roscoe with South City Partners. This is our third project here in the city of Fairburn, all multifamily. This one's actually mixed use. I'm not sure how much y'all want to run back through our project, but it's about 15 acres, 288 units. There's going to be 4,000 square feet of retail, which makes up 4 to 5 street front retail spaces that creates a mixed use environment. We're a majority one bedroom, 68%, 28% two bedroom, and 4% three bedroom. What we came to y'all before with was basically requesting a tax abatement from the Fairburn DDA in conjunction with Fulton County. And what this is a 10-year bonds for title program. And you know, what we had discussed with Fairburn city members and council and other community members is that park space was pretty high on the list for the city of Fairburn. So what we're proposing and what we have given to the city in the memo of understanding, as well as I believe y'all have, do they have it? So y'all have the memo of understanding. And what we're proposing is an upfront contribution of $250,000 to the city of Fairburn for future or current city of Fairburn parks to be used preferably in the Renaissance Parkway, Harris Road area, so that it can benefit all of the community that's over there. And, you know, because of the complexities with the Citizen Park that was previously proposed, I think it was back in November when I was in front of y'all, we've revised our offer to just include any and all parks that want to be constructed in the city of Fairburn. And so basically, as soon as the tax abatement is put into place, we would release the funds to the city to use how they want towards parks. In return, we would be entered into the 10-year bonds for title program. And basically how this works is the first year after construction, we would pay a 50% tax bill, and then the next year we would pay a 55%, and the next year would pay 60%, up until the 10th year when we're at 100%. The total 10-year benefit received from the city of Fairburn in taxes is roughly $350,000 to $400,000, and that's in net present value. So we discounted that by 6% per year, which I think is pretty conservative. And so we really think that's a pretty close trade-off, $250,000 up front, which really ends up coming 2 to 3 years before your first major tax bill would be received anyways, after you know, your new appraisal comes out after construction. And what this tax abatement allows us to do is it really lowers the minimum rent threshold that we can charge for our units. So really it's close to $100 a month is what it would allow us to lower that minimum threshold to. And just a little bit of info about our previous projects. So the Dillon, which previously was Croft House Fairburn, which is directly next door, it's gonna be a comp of ours. A third of those residents make $60,000 or less. And the current threshold for a resident living at the Dillon is $55,000 a year. So, basically by lowering that rent floor, it opens up $3,000 to $4,000 in annual salary for more residents to move into that project. So instead of $55,000 a year, you might see a $52,000, $51,000, $53,000 a year minimum salary to live there, and that's based on a 3X rental standard that's used across the multifamily market in Atlanta. And at the Dillon, we have 17 teachers, 16 healthcare workers, 11 government employees, 6 police officers, and close to 100 airline employees. And a lot of those people are the ones that are making $60,000 a year or less. I mean, it's good, hardworking people that you want to have in your city. And what we think is that this tax abatement is going to, open up a large majority, over 30% of our renter base being in that category. It's just going to open it up a little bit more. And allow for, some more of those teachers and healthcare workers and airline employees to have our apartments available to them as well. And then also, this is not on my notes, but it was brought to my attention that the Dillon, which we no longer own, but we on every one of our projects across the board, Fairburn, Atlanta, Marietta, wherever we're doing it, we do courtesy officer programs. So on every project, there are 3 to 4 police officers living on site, discounted rent, and they've got responsibilities as kind of a community officer where after their shift, they walk the property, they get to know all the residents, everyone's got their phone number, if there's issues, they're there. And we find that hugely beneficial at all of our projects, no matter what market. It just creates a really good, safe environment for all of our community members. It was brought to my attention that there are actually not any Fairburn police officers as courtesy officers at the Dillon. We would like to change that in this future project. We previously had Fairburn officers, now they are Fulton County police officers. So I would also like to throw it out there that we are more than willing to enter into a first come, first serve for Fairburn police officers to have that courtesy officer opportunity.
Great. Any questions?
Yeah.
How long did you guys have the Dillon before you sold the Dillon?
I think we owned that for about 2 years.
2 years?
Sold.
And is that so what would be the plan for this one?
It really just depends on the market. It depends on where we are with lease up and if we want to hold it or not. There's been projects that we've held for 5 or 6 years. There's been projects that we've sold before the first lease has been signed. So it's really market dependent, and we've got a financial responsibility to our equity partners. And
Do you know with the Dillon if once you sold it, were those rents, did they stay close to the same?
No, they've done really good. I believe they're 97% leased and occupied. It's actually managed by the same management company, so Alpha Management Partners is still managing that. And no, they've not had any issues on that project. It's been,
As well as the Dillon, is it majority like this one with 1 bedroom?
yeah,
It is.
it is. It's between 65 and 70% 1 bedroom and handful of 3s, but yeah,
Gotcha.
very similar mix.
Yeah, I think I raised the issue last time on the police and, fire and healthcare. In terms of Fairburn employees getting like a preference or the first bite at the apple, in
Yes.
terms of people, as opposed to people moving in, if there are already existing employees that applied, would they have a preference?
So, like I said, with the courtesy officer program, absolutely,
That's what I-
100%. We will do, Fairburn Police have the right of first refusal for that courtesy program.
Okay, and like teachers also, is that,
So we market towards teachers, and like I was mentioning, the lowering that minimum, salary threshold, the minimum rent that we can charge is gonna open up the door to, I think that $3,000 salary mark is gonna open up the door to quite a few more teachers, which is what we're hoping for at least.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
And Sylvia, was there some feedback from council on
Yes,
this
so,
discussion?
The next steps in this process is for the Development Authority to give their feedback regarding the proposed tax abatement. From there, we will provide that information to the city administrator, and he will decide in terms of the next steps.
Okay.
Yep. So if there is feedback this evening, and that could be set aside where you may want to have a letter of support that you follow up with at a later date, or if there's something that you want to go on the record this evening regarding, like Mr. Wells mentioned, that he wants first right of refusal for the courtesy officers, and that there to be some intentional marketing towards teachers. So that's something that we could outline in your letter of support. I do want to defer to our city council, Ms. Noel, to make sure if there's anything else that we may want to consider. Yeah. Should say city attorney, so not to be confusing.
Right, not city council.
Right.
So all of those issues, yes, and to the extent we can get something in writing about the courtesy officer program, so that we actually have, it'll be on a first-come, first-served basis. City of Fairburn officers get a right of first refusal. Maybe even if we're at a place where we know what concessions the courtesy officers get in terms of rent, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
so who's putting this together?
So what we would do from here is I will follow up with the chair of the authority, and we will look at a letter of support, which will then go to our legal counsel, to the city attorney, to review. And then that information will be forwarded to the city administrator's office for next steps.
Okay.
The issue, and again, I'm going to defer to our city attorney, the issue will be how it's presented back to mayor and council. So basically, this evening, the presentation is basically what they are providing in the way of and not so much as incentive, but what they're offering. You will give feedback, whether you're supporting that and what your recommendations are. That will go back to the administration for the work session presentation or as an agenda item.
Right.
Make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Ms. Noel, was there anything else on that? Okay.
So, as far as an incentive goes, we're talking about a $250,000 cash contribution to the city, if I'm understanding that right. For the parks. For the parks. In exchange for basically what equates to a $350,000 net present value and abatements. So you've got a $100,000 spread value for the project. Scale of the project seems pretty reasonable to me. I don't have any objection to that. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on that. Those figures seem pretty standard to me. Okay. I'm okay with that. And then Mr. Wells' recommendation of providing a first right of refusal for local officers.
Yes.
Fairburn police officers. As a courtesy officer, I think would be appropriate. Is there, I don't know what the standard practice is there, but as far as a timeline for, Is that something that you would typically do prior to a lease offering to the public?
Well, I think when they're doing your initial lease up, right, you would kind of advertise that to the police department and the Board of Ed.
We would reach out directly to the
Right.
city police officers. You know, we'll, as with the firm, sorry.
Yeah, so you can be on the record.
Oh, thank you, right, you're on record.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, so throughout lease up, we turn buildings, you know, the first building will be in month 15, the next building will be in month 17, and so on, and there's 5 buildings in this project. So we would likely have 1 police officer come on, and with the first turns, a second one come on a few months later, and a third one come on towards the end of the project. So,
Okay.
depending on how management wants to do it, that's most likely how it would play out.
Could we get a proposal like that in writing so we could include it in our letter of support? Thank you, that would be a good prerequisite to that. Anything else that we want to recommend in that letter of support, assuming that is something we decide on tonight?
I think, you know, like the tax abatement kind of speaks to itself in terms of the dollars and cents.
Sure.
This is just like an additional, you know, cherry on the top, if you will. So I see our letter of support being contingent more on the concept that we're discussing now in terms of, we call it a officer, what kind of officer?
A courtesy.
Courtesy officer,
Yes.
okay, yeah. I don't know what to call the teachers, but, you know, at any rate, yeah, it would be contingent on the courtesy officer and that write-up.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get that over to y'all ASAP.
Sounds appropriate, okay. Is this a voting item?
It is not a voting item, it's just an item for discussion.
Fantastic. So if we could receive that in writing from you guys, just on the specifics of the timing and any benchmarks or milestones that would be required for these courtesy officers, that would be helpful for us to draft up a letter of support for council.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Appreciate it, Sean. Right. Okay, let's see, where did my agenda has turned into my doodle pad. Let's see. All right. So, let's see, we have another item on the agenda, the DA and DDA attorney. Item to consider resolution establishing Dan McCray as the attorney for the Fairburn DA, DDA.
We skipped the
New meeting.
meetings.
Oh, I'm sorry, right. That's right. So let's go back. So the next item on the agenda, correction, is the new meeting schedule. And the only changes here being that these are on a monthly basis as opposed to a quarterly basis as previously scheduled. It looks like fourth Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. In council chambers, starting in March. Has everyone had an opportunity to review these dates? I mean, the only really topic of discussion here would be making sure that we have a consistent quorum across the schedule. And it looks like we can get away with Zoom, which is fantastic. So that definitely makes things better. Is there any comments, discussion?
I'm okay with it. My only hiccup is June 27th.
Okay, I probably have a handful, but I'll have access to strong internet, so I will be present, virtually if any. So I'll make sure to attend these meetings as scheduled, so. Okay.
One item that I do want to bring up, and this is also deferring to Ms. Knoll. In the bylaws, it has the quarterly meetings. So after they vote this evening, is there any additional steps that we need to include to change?
This is Todd Ireland to speak.
Go ahead, Todd.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, okay.
In regards to meeting on the fourth Tuesday night at 6 p.m., obviously I apologize for not being able to be there in person. I would like to suggest, I don't know if it'll be an amendment, if we're gonna make a motion to see if we'll make the schedule change. But if we could have like a working session, either prior to our meeting or immediately afterwards, because there's a lot of information that's being discussed.
Right.
And with us meeting so frequently every 4 weeks or so, I might not have an opportunity to really digest this information.
That's a good point, and that actually brings up another point is that, and I.
Sorry, can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, Todd, that's a good point. That brings up another question, which is, how flexible is this schedule? Because obviously, the docket will vary from month to month. So, do we have the flexibility to consolidate items and kind of roll them over to another meeting if there's just, say there's one item on the agenda? Or is that not common practice?
No, you do have flexibility with respect to your agenda. The important thing is to make sure that the items that'll be considered, that it's actually on the published agenda, but there's flexibility in the statutes that allows you to amend your agenda at a meeting, except if it's what's considered a special call meeting. Special call meetings have to stick strictly to what's been published.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Great. And I suppose we have the discretion to set work sessions and things of that nature, either prior to or post
Yes.
regular
yes,
meeting.
Yes, the only question that I do have is in terms of changing the dates as it's outlined in the bylaws.
In the bylaws. And if the bylaws require you to have meetings quarterly, is that
Yes.
what the case is?
Yes.
Right.
So your
Correct.
bylaws require quarterly. So I would view that as you at least need to meet quarterly,
At a minimum.
at a minimum.
Sure, understood.
Right.
Right.
So-
Otherwise, I forget people's names, and then it doesn't look great on the report.
Right, so
Understand. Thank you.
you're actually expanding your meetings versus contracting them.
Understood.
But if the pleasure of the board is to continue to meet monthly, if that's what you want the practice to be going forwards, it's not problematic for you to just amend your bylaws and say that you'll meet monthly.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So it sounds like we don't have to make that amendment immediately, but we do have to meet quarterly. So if
As
you
it
all-
stands.
As it
yes.
stands. So if
Right.
you all want another meeting or so, we can set aside this vote and give more opportunity for you to decide on what's going to be best for your schedules.
Do you see a pipeline of projects that would potentially require that frequency of meetings?
So one of the things that the Development Authority will begin to consider are the facade grants. We have tentatively 3 additional applications that will be coming up for your review and consideration in March. And one of them, if they're unable to get all their their quotes from their contractors, it will push over to April. You have 2 projects that are upcoming. We will have to revisit the historic bank building project.
Sure.
And then there are 2 new developments that are proposed for your consideration over the next 2 to 3 months. So at least on the short scale, for the next 4 months, you have projects for your consideration and review. The small business grant program will launch in June. That won't necessarily be for your consideration because there will be a company to facilitate that, but there is a consistent stream of projects for you to review.
Okay.
But to your point, what we can do is set this aside, the committee, you can think about your respective schedules, and then on our next meeting, maybe we can come with maybe every other month.
Yeah, I was thinking like, we could do between now and then, like, special call meetings
Okay,
to approve the applications, you know, quick in and out, you know, and maybe even virtually, you know.
And those meetings will have to be advertised because it'll be beyond, well, when I say advertised,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
we can post the schedule of the meeting, the notice of the meeting on the city website, and post a copy outside of City Hall, so that there's a notice up there and the public's put on.
Would that be a burdensome format to proceed with as it stands, just doing quarterly meetings on a regular basis with special called for instances where we do have something to address on the docket.
I'll defer to Sylvia in terms of how much more of an administrative burden that will be on her shop.
Okay.
So one thing I do want to acknowledge that Chris is on the phone and he has his hand up, so he wants to, but as far as administratively, we can facilitate the agendas and the projects as needed. But I see Chris has his, wanted to chime in on this.
Okay, Chris.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Evening.
My apologies, I'm a little under the weather, so I wasn't able to be there in person. But did wanted to provide just a little bit of insight. So Sylvia did mention about the projects we have coming on board, but there's also some policy and procedure things that we need to work on
Sure.
as well that I think is important, because some of these things that we're getting ready to consider from a incentive and business standpoint, we don't really have policies to support those things. And so the reason why we were recommending meeting more regularly was to get those policies in place so that we know better how to do the incentive parts when projects come to us.
I see. So we have some sort of housekeeping to address internally too.
Which makes sense.
That does make sense, yes, because that sounds right. Okay. I mean, in that case, I mean, if we come to a point where we have nothing to discuss, we just don't have a meeting.
That's right.
We call it out. That's appropriate. Well, in that case, I personally fine with the monthly schedule, assuming we have something that needs to be discussed and met over. Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, all right. So do we have a motion to approve the new meeting schedule on a monthly basis, starting on March 28th?
So we just do that through a motion?
At this point, yes.
Okay, so move,
Moved, second?
the new schedule.
Second.
Second. All right, and all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. New meeting schedule is adopted. Okay, on to our next item on the agenda. The DA and DDA attorney, item to consider resolution establishing Dan McCray as the attorney for the Fairburn DA DDA.
Yes. So before we get started, I'll give some more information about Dan McCray. Dan McCray, we were talking about early in the process about identifying an attorney and an accountant. We're at the stage where a recommendation for an attorney has been established, and I'll give his bio. He was scheduled to be here today, has a closing, and I believe can make the next meeting.
March 28th.
Exactly, but let me go ahead and just read into record generally his bio. Local authorities and governments seek to attract new business investment and encourage the expansion of existing industry. He works in finance and investment over the years, amounts to billions of dollars for private companies, local authorities, and local governments. He brings a wealth of experience concentrating on practice areas involving finance, incentives, and investment transactions, as well as representation of private companies, local authorities, and local governments. He has extensive knowledge on various matters, including but not limited to municipal bond financing, capital markets financing, including CMBS transactions, bondable leases, synthetic leases, and other off-balance sheets transactions, capital leases, and other, and operating leases. He assists the members of the Georgia's General Assembly in drafting economic development legislation that has become law in the state of Georgia. He has knowledge in structuring complex financing as well, and is well known with authorities and local governments, and is frequently asked to speak at various events and meetings. And one of the things, his education is a Juris Doctorate from Emory University, and a Bachelor of Arts from Emory University as well. One of the things that I will say is that he is an established expert in not only the corporate arena, but in development authorities. Much of the training that takes place with many of the economic development professionals in development authorities is done through Dan McRae's company, and so that's just to provide an overview. And I also want to defer to Chris to add to any additional information regarding Mr. McRae.
I don't really have much more to add other than, I consider Dan to be, kind of the best in the business, and for him wanting to work with us, I think is a good testament to what we have going on in Fairburn. I also think it's important to point out is that a lot of his services that he's doing for non-billable hours, so that's always helpful as well when you don't have a lot of money. And so I think that's also a good consideration for his willingness to want to work with us.
Great.
So the authority has for its consideration a resolution. One of the things that was brought out earlier is having time to review the resolution. So it is an item that you can vote this evening, or you can set it aside for vote when Mr. McRae can attend the meeting next month.
Is he a nice guy? It'd be good to meet him.
Yes.
No, on that aside, we obviously have a budget, an operating budget for an attorney. I assume that his proposal fits within that budget scope.
So what we can do is we can set it aside and we can talk about how it will be funded. Chris is chiming in. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's hard to disconnect about being there. So basically what Dan has done is he, in addition to being the attorney for the DDA, is in the resolution, has put in to also be the bond attorney. So generally, his pay will come when he does bond or incentive deals, which that is done by the actual recipient of the incentive. So the DDA or Development Authority doesn't pay for that. So when I said he was donating his hours, so like when we call him and ask him a question, or if we need him to get on a meeting with a prospective, developer or prospective business, he doesn't charge us for that. But in return for that, he does all of our bond deals and all of our incentive deals.
That's great.
Which is paid by the developer and not by the developer.
On a fee basis, right. No, that sounds, that's great. Works. Okay, thank you. Answers my question.
Mr. Island has a question or comment?
Yes, once again, this is Todd Ireland. And prior to us been entertaining Mr. Crater's name as an attorney, my suggestion is that we look at other outfits.
I lost you.
If you could say, bid this project out.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ireland, we couldn't hear you on that last bit. I think we lost you. You suggest that we look at what else?
That we have another attorney so that we could at least bid this project out.
Oh, I understand. So as a competitive bid, that brings up a good question. What was the process of selection?
So one of the things I do want to ask Ms. Knoll is the Development Authority has a standard for review. Does that include a bid process?
So typically, professional services, like attorneys and accountants, those services aren't typically bid in the traditional sense.
Right.
And because public finance is such a specialized niche in the law, we know who all the players are.
I understand, yes.
So what I have done in the past is for larger entities that will have a lot of transactions, we establish a pool. Mr. McRae's, his professional reputation precedes him. And what I would suggest, which a lot of issuers don't do, is actually get an engagement agreement. so that we know what the terms of his engagement are.
Sure.
And that's just, you know, a belt and suspenders kind of approach that I've always taken.
I like that. Good suggestion. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So what would that be, like a scope of services?
Absolutely. It'll be a scope of services and whatever the compensation will be for those services. So as
Oh, that's
Mr.
true.
Pike said, I think Mr. McCray will provide services, not gratis, but he'll be paid out of any of the transactional proceeds
Right.
that he represents the authority on.
Performance-based. Okay. Well,
Would that be ready for the next time we meet?
Yeah.
I think in this, yeah, I will, for one, I would like to meet the gentleman and perhaps have him prepare an engagement agreement prior to that meeting so that we could review and posture any questions that we might have for that. I think that would be a good next step. So in the meantime, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to table the vote for item 5.2, DA and DDA attorney, for our next meeting on March 28th.
So move.
To meet.
Sorry?
To meet?
To our next meeting.
Oh, God, I'm sorry, okay.
We'll table it until our
Got
next
it,
meeting.
got it, okay.
It may have been unnecessary for me to say. So do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, wonderful.
Sir,
A little delay there.
Got that delay.
Okay. Any new business?
There,
Wonderful. Any other discussion? Okay. Fantastic, guys. Very efficient meeting today. I will go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting. Do we have a motion? To adjourn.
I want to stay here. No, motion.
Come on, guys.
Motion.
We have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. It is 7:07 PM.